Hey everyone, welcome back to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. In these fireside chats, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. My guest today is Christine Devane, CEO and founder of Brightfin. Christine's a recovering English major, new to the finance world. She has an interesting career path, first writing, then marketing, then on to product marketing, before ending up in product management. With a long-standing entrepreneurial bent, the first company Christine launched was a pie business. And later, around the 10th anniversary of the financial crisis, Brightfin was launched because regular people needed financial tools. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Thanks, Curtis. It's great to be here.
So, pies. Can we talk a little bit about pies? Pies to finance. How did we start with pies?
People love to talk about pies, and I don't blame them. I don't make them professionally anymore, but I do still like to eat them. So I actually just made one last week. Blueberry peach is delicious. So the pie business was called Wedge Pies. I'm based in Chicago, so it was here. We never had a storefront, but just delivered, baked in a commercial kitchen, and hand delivered pies around the Chicagoland area. Yes. And when I say we, it's not just a royal we. My mom helped me, my two sisters helped, and we had another very gracious helper as well. So I had some help with the pie business. One of the things that I realized while doing the pie business, and so this does segue to finance in its own way. Okay. One of the things that I realized while doing the pie business was that I wasn't very good at managing the accounting. I was committed to making it work. I wanted to have the best product. I wanted to source the best ingredients. And so I went into a little bit of credit card debt, working on Wedge Pies. I had a full-time job the whole time, so I was able to pay that off. It was not a huge deal, but I had that moment where I realized, oh, we've gone over. We're not profitable. I knew we were not profitable, but I didn't realize how much of that we weren't even really breaking even. So I started to think, okay, I have a good amount of education and experience in life, and I still think this is difficult. I wonder if other people are finding finances difficult. And no surprise, indeed they were.
Yeah, that's no surprise at all. So, I'm out of curiosity, English major, pies, I kind of understand how it sort of drew you into this idea of how you might be able to solve that problem. But what drew you to tech, right? Founding a fintech platform was probably not your goal, right? When you started off as an English major.
No, not on my graduation bingo card.
So
That's for sure.
Why fintech, and more specifically, why Brightfin? So what brought you here? I'd love to learn. So we had the problems, and then bring me up to like today. What was that journey like?
Yes. So as I said, had a full-time job while I was working on the pie business. I had a whole corporate career that brought me from marketing to product management. In the course of that, I got some experience on mobile software development, and really from the product side. I'm not a developer, but building mobile applications. And then I went to grad school at Northwestern, and similar to, in a way, the pies, where I was looking at sort of a gap, thinking it's hard to get good pie. When I was at Northwestern, it was the 10th anniversary of the financial crisis, and we realized it is hard to get good financial advice that is affordable for large parts of the population. So that is where Brightfin was concepted at Northwestern. During that 10th anniversary of the financial crisis. And fast forward to today, we've launched an app and are out in the App Store. We're starting with very simple expense tracking, but soon moving into that dream that we want to realize, which is affordable financial advice for many, many more people.
So I love that. And we sort of we at Mustard Hub have done, continue to do, a lot of research into what, kinds of things people really want from their employers in terms of benefits and perks, and financial wellness benefits are a big one. I think that people are looking for. So it's no
Hmm.
surprise. I think that people are seeking out financial wellness solutions and other products to kind of help them, manage their finances on their own. And Brightfin's one of them. So let's
Yes.
talk about Brightfin. What do you do for your customers?
Yes. So today, the product we have, and I'll kind of maybe go back and forth between the vision that we have for the future and then the product that we have for today.
Yeah, definitely.
We are an early stage startup, so this is the reality. Selling something that is a big vision, hugely impactful, and then figuring out the smallest place to start. So we're kind of back and forth between both of those things. Today, the value that we provide in our application is very, very simple expense tracking. So all you have to do is swipe. Unlike some other competitors that have maybe a lot of categories, Mint had 87, just FYI. Brightfin has four: spend, splurge, save, and share. And when you've connected your accounts, transactions come up in the middle of the screen, and all you have to do is swipe to one of those four corners: spend, splurge, save, and share. So it's loosely based on the 50-30-20 rule, which has been a common rule of thumb in personal finance for 20 years. When we looked for an app that could do it well, we didn't find one, so we decided to build one. That being, about the simplest expense tracking method that there is, just high level percentages.
Yeah.
But if 50-30-20 doesn't work for you, and it definitely doesn't work for everybody, then we have a few different options. There's a very short menu. Let's see if I can think of all of them off the top of my head. Because I'm an English major, we gave them titles and descriptions as well as numerical breakdowns. But the debt crusher, for example, flips the 30 and the 20. So you are saving 30% and splurging only 20. So the debt crusher, the YOLO, is only a 10% savings because some
You,
people, young people especially, want to live their
because
lives,
you
and
only
that's not
live
wrong.
once.
Literally true. Literally true. So the debt crusher, the YOLO, we have the wealth builder and the fire for people who are able to save, perhaps more. Maybe they have good jobs and are living at home, for example. We also have in this economy, which is a specific request from one of our users because things are expensive right now. So rather than 50-30-20, that one's 60-30-10. And I think there's one that I'm missing, but if it comes to me, I'll let you know.
I like that. So, you know, I'm curious to hear, from your perspective, or maybe you've listened to a lot of your customers. Why do you think your customers are going to Brightfin versus the competitors? Is it
Yeah,
the simplicity of those categories? Are there other things that they seem to find valuable?
yeah. We have a number of early customers who struggle with ADHD. And one of the things that they have told, and that's not everybody, but when you build something for a power user or a user who has a very strong need, it ends up being better for everybody. And I'll give you an example. OXO Good Grips, those kitchen tools with the black plastic or rubberized handles that are a little bit oversized, maybe compared to some of the things that used to be out there. OXO, it's at Target, it's a big brand everywhere. Those products were created by someone whose wife had arthritis. And so he realized that it was difficult for her to grasp a lot of smaller, trickier things, produced those, and it turned out everybody liked them better because they were more comfortable for everyone. So that's kind of how we think of some of the very strong use cases for a simpler expense tracker. And folks who have ADHD are certainly one of those niche markets. They struggle with some of the other competitors because there are too many categories, because they sort of have to sit down at a laptop to do it and invest some time and kind of convince themselves that it's going to be worth it. One of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten about Brightfin is that people like that it's on the go. So you could be sitting on the bus, or waiting for something, waiting at the doctor's office, and just swipe a few transactions to the corners the same way you swipe through TikTok or the same way you swipe Tinder. It's a motion that people are very used to, and
Yeah.
it's very simple, and you can pick it up, you can put it down. So that's something that people certainly value, the simplicity, like you mentioned, and then the fact that it's kind of on the go, available whenever you're ready to look at it.
Yeah, I like that. Managing your finances on the go,
Yeah.
available when life gives you a minute.
Yes.
Um, that's and you can have that one for free. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Perfect.
um, but to pivot into some topics that we talk about a lot here, let's talk about people.
Hmm.
Right? We talk a lot about people problems. Um, I would classify the workforce facing economic insecurity as a people problem, possibly. You talked about one of those categories you have in this economy. Um, had a lot of recent conversations about how economic challenges are impacting, negatively the workforce.
Hmm.
It's hard to focus on your job and be engaged if you're worried about making ends meet. Do you see financial challenges impacting regular folks at work?
Yes, certainly. I think the biggest one that we see is the student loan burden. So our customers are disproportionately in their 20s to early 30s, and this is the student loan generation. Um, they were told that a bachelor's degree or even master's degree was the way to go, the way to get ahead. And statistically, it still is. I don't think that that was entirely false, but I think the promise of that has somewhat diminished. It's harder to find jobs in general, and it is harder to find some of the higher paying jobs that you might have expected after getting that bachelor's degree or that master's degree. So when the even if interest rates, are not too much higher than they were 20 years ago on a student loan,
Yeah.
the reality of inflation and the high cost of the big things like housing, rent and mortgages, both of them way up, as well as the total cost of that education, and then inflationary pressures, plus the fact that it's harder to get a job now. This is sort of a perfect storm that is making it
Yeah.
difficult for people.
It's the cost of that education is starting to outpace the return on the investment that you're making in getting it. I can certainly tell you that my degree in jazz composition wasn't quite as valuable as I thought it might be.
Yep, yep. Yeah. And I mean, to be, I don't want to throw any shade at the degrees that I have. I loved my education, value my education. As you said at the beginning, am a recovering English major. What does that get you? Not a clear pipeline into anything, but I definitely believe that that was incredibly valuable for me. And I stand by having done it. So I do think higher education is still a good idea, but running the numbers, it's not as helpful for as many people as it used to be,
Yeah.
based on the realities of the economics.
But hey, you're good at words.
I am good at words. Yes,
Do you-
I had a fellow English major tell me that the thing that you learn as an English major is how to take something that doesn't make sense and make sense of it. And
you
I
belong in
really,
government.
I really like. Well, yeah. But I really liked that, and I think it has been true. Just the ability to kind of synthesize things, and
Yeah.
now I have a finance app that's based on alliteration, so you have to be open to what life throws at you.
Do you think that, given all these challenges that people are facing, you talk about the generation or, that, or what that dominant persona is of users on your platform. Do you think employers are doing enough to help their staff with these issues? What else do you feel like they could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the need is real and it's huge. So we need to tackle this from all possible angles. Brightfin is mostly a consumer product, but I think there are roles to play for nonprofits in education. You know, should we teach this more in schools? I think yes. Should employers help with it more? I think yes. I think we need to tackle this from every possible angle. I mean, US credit card debt is over $1 trillion. That's something that we, often blame ourselves for, blame society. This is how we spend and it's not good. But I think a lot of that covers the, or maybe overshadows the reality of what people are facing to make ends meet. Sometimes you need something, you buy it on a credit card. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Many years ago, you couldn't do that because credit cards didn't exist. So people just didn't have those things that they needed. So now people could sort of have the things, but they have the debt to go with it as well. So that's, I don't know, just a quick trip down, history or memory lane there. But
Hmm.
I think these are the realities we're dealing with. And I do think employers have a role to play in helping people with that.
I think that obviously financial insecurity is one. It's just one people problem, um, or can be perceived at least as one people problem. What are some of the other pressing people problems you see in business outside of that? Either that you've witnessed with your customers, your own organization, some of the ones you worked with in during your career and your journey.
Yeah, I would say something that, and maybe this is an indication that I was always destined to be an entrepreneur. So uh, take this with a grain of salt as a voice of one. But in my 20-year corporate career, I was always dismayed when leadership would assume that they needed to look externally for solutions, for ideas, for whatever problem they faced, they felt like they had to go hand it to somebody else. And as the kind of rank and file employees, I thought we were yelling our heads off about, hey, we see this problem. We know how you could fix this problem. Listen to us. And I think a lot of leadership could maybe exercise their listening muscles a little bit better because the people on the ground doing your work, the work of your company every single day, they know things better than anybody else. And they probably have ideas today that leadership is not listening to. So I guess if I could get one little bit out there on this to leadership of any company, it's listen to your people.
I really love that. In some of the previous businesses that I've actually owned, I mean, my best ideas came from the people that worked
Right.
on the ground, like you said. I mean, there's a lot of ownership, right? In the, I think ownership is really important for workers, and I think that their feedback, right, and ideas, being really heard by management, possibly even acted
Hmm.
on, you know,
Hmm.
gives that sense of ownership. It's a major driver for engagement, I believe. Um, Given that, what's the best way for leaders to begin soliciting this kind of feedback? I mean, where do they start?
I mean, you have to ask and you have to then do something about it. Even if you summarize it and share it back with people. That's a start. That says, I heard you. I spent some time in consulting. So, in a corporate environment, I had the very weird experience of being a consultant and going into some companies and having, it was the leadership that was paying the bills, the leadership that decided to bring us in, the leadership that gave us that initial welcome. Then they'd introduce us to the team, and the team would immediately say to us, here's what we've been trying to tell them. And thank goodness you're here. And maybe if you say it, then it will get through. Then it will make a difference. That is a very expensive way to get feedback from the people that you're seeing and talking to every single day.
Yeah.
So I think, whether it's you have some kind of anonymous way that people can give feedback, if that can be helpful. I think if you don't have the best working culture, maybe that's a way to start because people don't feel like they're allowed to say things, or they're fearful of it or whatever. So if nothing else, maybe start there. And otherwise, if you do have, a better relationship, especially at maybe a smaller company, I mean, have a meeting, just sit down, ask people, and it doesn't have to be terribly formal. But I mean, are you having lunch with people? Are you, having coffee in the morning and checking in with how it's going? You have to kind of ask.
I think that a culture of listening, transparency, communication, I think it goes a long way to create workplace happiness.
Hmm.
Asking obviously, gives that sense of ownership. Um, Beyond leaders doing that to find ways to improve their organization, what can they do to build a happy, thriving culture in the organization? What have you seen work? You said you consulted for a little bit, or what have you seen not work?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I bring up listening because I think a lot of it does go back to that. But as an English major, I will also say that the communications are important, and keeping everyone's eyes on the goal. Um, the advice that I've heard as a startup founder is that my job is it should be three things, and I think this is not just startup founders. I think this can be true for anybody really, in any project, any company. But three things, and if the last one doesn't apply, you're lucky. But it's set the vision, build the team, and don't run out of money.
Oh, yes. I was
So if
wondering when Go Raise Money was going to work its way
yes,
in there.
yes, yes. So are you setting the vision? Do people, and this doesn't have to be highfalutin either. I mean, if you have a sandwich shop, do you have, and you own it, you probably have a goal of how many sandwiches you want to sell. Let people know that, Um, there is a vision, there is a next milestone, there is a something that you want to accomplish as a business. Be sure that's communicated and shared with everybody so that
Yeah.
they can share in the overall success. And then building the team, of course, is about camaraderie and communication again. But I see that as a big part of my job as well, and a big part of any leadership role. And then if you're a small business, of course, you don't want to run out of money. You probably already know how to keep that tight if you're thinking about that. And if you're not the one that's responsible for the money, then you're lucky.
I mean, this is true, right?
Yeah.
I, we could probably break it up into those three buckets. There. You could also argue there's 10 buckets, right? Or sometimes just one. Make it go.
Yeah. Yes.
It all falls on your plate.
Hmm.
When you think of teams or organizations you admire, not just those that you've worked with or that you're leading now, um, I'd, I'd be curious just to kind of hear from your perspective some common traits, that stand out in leaders when they really kind of get it right with their people.
Yeah. I think you can tell a lot about a working environment when you see how free or not free people feel to voice their opinions or say things.
100%.
That tells you a lot. I mean, I definitely saw that as a consultant coming in and saying, if there were things that couldn't be talked about with certain people in the room, that was always a red flag.
Mm,
So open communication, I think, is a huge one. And if you've got that, you can solve a lot of other problems. Google did a study about high performing teams, and what they found more than anything, that was an indicator of how well the team was working, was how much everyone talked. So if you had six people on a team,
mm.
if they all talked about the same amount, that was usually a pretty good team.
Yeah.
And if you had, two people just carrying the whole thing, and then four not piping up at all, then that was often a not a very good sign. So I think about as a leader trying to make sure sometimes you have to give people the space. There
Yeah.
are people who are extroverts, or introverts, and sometimes you hear more from certain people and less from others. And sometimes you need to, as I said earlier, kind of ask people. Just give them the space, give them the silence to speak up. And sometimes they'll surprise you with what they say.
You feel like there's a formula for nailing this, you know? I mean, sometimes people are looking for you
Formulas.
to say again?
I said, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of formulas. I know consulting likes formulas, but that's why I don't do that anymore.
How about this? Do you feel like technology plays a role here? Do you think leaders are making the right decisions when they're, you know, looking at different ways to support building that kind of culture, whether it's software or systems, process, consultants? You have any recommendations there?
um, I think really at a high level, they're all just different tools,
Yeah.
and any tool works as long as you use it effectively. And having more tools doesn't necessarily always solve any problem. So, do I think there's a role to play? Sure, but no, I don't have any particular recommendations because I think I'm kind of old school. Just do whatever works and keep going.
So sticking with tech as a topic because you are a fintech founder. Um, there's a lot of platforms out there that businesses use to spit out lots of data. And, you know, I think it's hard for a lot of business owners sometimes to filter noise from signals. Do you think
Hmm.
there's a disconnect sometimes between what folks are trying to track and what actually drives results when it comes to either performance or culture or things that are often difficult to nail down with numbers?
Yeah, I think you can get. I think two things. You need to know what you want to get out of it, and if you're measuring something that sometimes when you have these conversations, you realize that what's being measured is not what's driving the results that leadership says they want. Uh, you know, they'll be
Yeah.
saying it's so important that we get XYZ done by a certain date, or that we achieve this numerical milestone, or whatever. And then on a day to day basis, they're actually looking at something else.
Right.
So
It's a good point.
knowing what you want, making sure that whatever you're measuring is actually measuring what you want to see ultimately. uh, that's a big part of it, and then making sure everybody knows that and can drive at that as well.
I mean, I could tie that back to your platform, right? You have these different
Hmm.
categories for people to describe themselves and their habits, right?
Hmm.
If they don't know what they want or what they're trying to achieve, how effective is the platform going to be, right? They have to have
Right.
some understanding of what desire and outcome that they're looking for in order to be able to even define whether or not it's successful.
Yes, yes. And I'm glad you brought it back to that, actually, because it's another differentiator in its own way. I've been kind of dismayed by using some competing products that begin with "Tell me all your life goals." I've just downloaded an app. Imagine I'm 27 years old. You want how many kids you're going to have? I don't know. I mean, are you serious? This is just about managing my expenses.
Yeah.
So what we did, instead of leading with those goals, it's important to have goals and everything, but I don't think this is maybe one area where you can take a suggestion to get you going rather than getting overwhelmed by long-term goals. So that's why we have those 6 targets, and why we have a certain savings target for each one every month, to sort of take the pressure off of that long term life planning and bring
Hmm.
it forward to something more near, which is, can you save 10% of your income this month?
Yeah.
Don't worry about buying a house in 15 years. That's extremely stressful. And there's going to be a lot of that that is not under your control.
Yeah.
But you know how much income you're going to make next month, hopefully. Can you figure out how to save 10% of that? Make that doable. I grew up playing softball and baseball, and all you try to do is win every inning. And so
Right.
if you win every month with a certain target of your expenses or savings, then you compile that over a certain amount of time, and you've got something to show for it, and then you can think about your goals.
Do you have married couples with like joint accounts? Is that possible?
It's definitely possible. We're targeting young people, so
Targeting young people.
some of them are married, but perhaps fewer of them than it would be if we were targeting, say, people in their 40s. But there is not necessarily a sharing part of it, but there's still nothing to stop you from connecting multiple accounts. So let's say you had a joint account and two separate accounts, you could connect all of those to Brightfin and manage it all together if you wanted to.
Yeah. I know that, relationally, right? It's often a difficult topic, finances and things like that. And I guess where I was kind of going with that is just wondering how folks might reconcile one being the YOLO and the other being the debt
Yes,
crusher, and how that
yes,
seems to work itself out in the app.
yes. Now that gets into levels of couples therapy that I will say I am not qualified to
Yeah.
discuss, but I do know that there are a lot of differences in relationships about money, and a lot of those have to do with different ways of being brought up and different
Yeah.
psychologies that develop over time. I kind of have a theory that everybody's money psychology is set when they're about 12 and it doesn't really change. This is why Warren Buffett still goes to McDonald's and doesn't buy things, because he didn't grow up with the kind of money that he has now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I could definitely see how that tracks. Going back to some of this data, some of these people signals, inside organizations, if you could design a dashboard to just reveal one key metric, piece of data, a people signal, inside a company. If you worked with a few, what is that insight that you'd want to surface?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the company, the size of the company, and what you're trying to achieve. Um, do you want to work together better?
Okay.
That could be one thing. How do you measure that? I mean, I don't know immediately, but usually people just measure revenue and don't worry about our costs. They measure the financial things in a business and don't worry about the other aspects. But I'm a firm believer that those other things can definitely affect the bottom line. So I think it's important to just keep your eyes open and know what might be holding you back at any given time, and then try to measure whatever that is.
I suppose, again, going back to what you were just saying about sort of defining, what those goals are, helping you kind of understand where the bottlenecks are to get there. If you rely on a highly collaborative team that isn't collaborating, well, then there's your
Right,
people signal.
right, right. Yes, yes. And I mean, especially now as the CEO of a startup, I know there are things that we could be doing more efficiently. I know there are things that we could be documenting better, but I also know that a lot of those don't matter right now. I mean, we're focused on growing our user base. That's our main thing. And so if some of our Jira tickets are not quite organized, that's just the project management software we use. That's what a lot of software developers use. So quick shout out to Jira. If our Jira tickets aren't as well organized as they could be, that's okay. We need to let that one go because we need to be focused on our main metric, which is getting ourselves out there and growing our user base.
So, to kind of tie all this in, and sort of as we wrap up a little bit, I'd love to think a little bit about the future. Like when you think about the future, I'm curious to hear your perspective on what you feel like business leaders could be thinking about when it comes to financial wellness for their workforce, and if this ties into Brightfin at all.
Yeah, I mean, when people go to work, they're still people, right? So anything that is in the environment that we find ourselves in does come into the workplace. People bring that in. If they're worried about money and they come in every day, they're still worried about that. They're still the same people that they were at home. So I think recognizing that is important. And I'm making a few assumptions here that with all of the broader talk about the economy, people are more worried now than they would have been, 10 years ago or whatever. Um, and so recognize that that's the background that people have, and look for ways to support them in that. I mean, I think what you guys are doing is terrific, and I hope employers start to recognize that, and it gets them thinking about their employees and their needs in a different and more holistic way. But I think there is a role to play for employers and consumer solutions to make the economic challenges of today and um, tomorrow. Let's hope they lessen and not increase, but make those economic challenges less challenging over time.
I like that. So, you know, last really kind of a last topic for now. If a business leader, we'll split it up into two parts here. If a business leader came to you asking for advice on how to really kind of get it right when it comes to growing their team, right? Which would be number two in your list of three,
Mm-hmm.
um, or taking care of their people, right? What's the one thing, if you have like 2 seconds, right? You're on the elevator and you're almost at the top floor and they ask for your advice. What do you tell them?
Well, I would say that's sort of a two-part answer
Mhm.
because building the team involves recognizing where your gap is. As I said earlier, I started this because I'm not great with the numbers. So I have a co founder who is. I knew that I would need that. So recognizing, being a little bit self aware to recognize maybe what you're not good at. And if you have a larger company than ours, that's just a few people, then recognize what gap you have, maybe more in your organization or what you want to accomplish, and recruit for that or ask people to kind of step in and fill that gap. So you have to see the gap first. Then in terms of building the team, that gets into I would see that I see that part of the question as kind of coalescing with the people that you already have. And I think it gets back to some of the stuff we've already talked about, making sure everybody feels comfortable to speak up, and to share things, to
Mhm.
participate in the goals of your organization. If people don't feel like their work is meaningful or that it's adding to what you're trying to do as a team, then they start to mentally check out. So
Yeah,
make sure everybody understands, their role in moving the ship forward to wherever you're going.
love that. I do. And I'm 100% behind that. So, part two, if a regular person, right, or a member of the workforce, right, comes to you and asks for some advice on how they can do it right when it comes to their personal finances, right? What's the one main thing that you think they should do? What's the advice that you leave them with before you hit that top floor on the elevator?
Mm-hmm. I will assume that we're kind of starting at the beginning here. Usually, people that have more money than I do in investments are not asking me that question. So I go back to what Brightfin does the best, which is understand your income and expenses. And there is really no other way to manage your money than to spend less than you make. There's no hacks, there's no solution that's going to get you out of that. And that is something that applies equally no matter how much money you make. So if you don't know your monthly income and expenses, make it your job to know that right away. We've tried to make Brightfin the easiest way to find that out. There's certainly many other methods, so whatever works for you is great. but know how much you are making and spending every month. Start there.
First of all, that's good advice, not just for individuals, but also for businesses, right? I mean, some
Definitely.
people
Yep.
will ask, how do you, build a successful business, or how do you prevent, your small business or your whatever endeavor, from going out of business? And the truth is, make sure your revenue is greater than your expenses. That's it. If you just cover
Yep.
that, you will be in
And
good shape. And I think that on a personal level, I think there's a straight line, right, to connecting the two, and
yes,
it's kind of the same thing. Just make sure that you're keeping that stuff in check. Does that sound about right?
yes, absolutely. And that is the one, back to the pies, that is the one that I learned the hard way. So I'm not going to make that mistake
So
again.
you started a financial wellness app. I love that.
Yes. Yes. Via pastry.
Be a pastry. Well, thank you so much, Christine. I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time to join me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Please share this fireside chat. Be sure to come back for our next episode. More insights are on the way. Also, check us out at mustardhub.com to see how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time.